Yes, joining us now to break it all down is VOA correspondent Jessica Stone. She joins us live from Washington, D.C. Morning, Jessica.
Good morning.
So there's a lot of international economic meetings going on in Washington this week, with the IMF and also the World Bank. So what's the discussion about so far? And do you know if there is an impact of the war between Russia and Ukraine on Southeast Asia in particular?
Well, the White House taking a lot of time this week to make the case at the IMF World Bank meetings that this is not just a problem for Europe, but that this war is impacting the entire globe, particularly Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says in the cost of food around the world. She said it's leading to pressure on food prices and could put 10 million additional people into poverty this year simply because they don't have enough to eat. She says the poorest countries will suffer the most, and experts also point out that Indonesia and Thailand are particularly at risk because of their dependence on migrant labor, imported food, and at times the ravages of drought. Now, Ukraine is also the main source of wheat, as we've discussed before, for Indonesia, for Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Laos. So all of those countries on notice for the impact on food prices. And I know we were talking earlier, and you guys are also seeing a real impact on cooking oil prices as well.
That's right. Now, Jessica, we understand that Russia is also virtually attending this International Monetary Fund and World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C. This is despite of the ongoing war in Ukraine. So what has been the response of the other finance ministers in attendance?
Well, there is a divide between the G7, more advanced economies, and the rest of the G20, but certainly there was a walkout in protest by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and the Ukraine finance minister, some of the other G7 ministers, including France, at the IMF World Bank meetings. When it came to a G20 meeting, they literally walked out the door as soon as they saw the Russian finance minister began to speak. And this, of course, is an organized protest aimed at Russia's membership in G20. The question being asked, should it remain a member of the G20 given what's going on in Ukraine? And the U.S. has made the case that it should not. They proposed kicking Russia out of the group. Yellen, meantime, will virtually meet with the Ukrainian prime minister, and much of her focus at these meetings is building additional support for isolating Russia economically and for increasing financial aid to Ukraine. And Washington also taking the time to work with China specifically to make the case that they have more to gain than to lose from pressuring Russia. Yellen's deputy, Wally Adeyemo, saying, quote, China's business with the rest of the world is greater than its business with Russia.
And we're also learning more about U.S. efforts to stop using foreign construction supplies as investment in new national infrastructure. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Joe Biden, the U.S. president, spent some time on Tuesday in New Hampshire and speaking to people at a port, which is scheduled for a lot of infrastructure help. We had this big infrastructure investment bill passed last year. And in it, there is going to be a provision that will prevent people using any foreign materials to construct projects as part of receiving funds from that bill for infrastructure development throughout the country. This is part of Joe Biden's effort to say, hey, listen, we need to make more things in America, make a priority not to import so much from the rest of the world. And that mandate I mentioned earlier going into effect on May 14th. Now, we know that most of the steel manufacturers are in China. There are a few also in South Korea, but they're not going to be impacted most likely by this measure by the U.S. government because the U.S. gets most of its steel from Canada, Brazil, and Mexico. But, there's a lot of drywall, insulation, lumber, paint, nails that are made in China that could be impacted by this.
Right, and I would like to also ask you about this particular story that is making headlines, I guess not only in the U.S. but also around the world, on Twitter. So, social media platform Twitter has been in the headlines for quite some time now, since the wealthiest man in the world, Elon Musk, was thinking of actually buying Twitter. So, what is the latest on this, Jessica?
Well, he doesn't have it yet, but he is still trying. He made a $41 billion attempt to buy Twitter and take it private because there is this ongoing discussion here domestically about free speech and about whether Twitter should allow additional forms of speech. It's considered pretty restrictive by its critics And Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, is one of those critics. He's also one of the highest profile users of Twitter and has been stringing the public along. I will say it's pretty entertaining to just watch and wait and try to read into his tweets. He has been asking for an edit button in Twitter, and Twitter actually says it's working on it. He's also calling for Twitter to make its algorithm public, which would let all of us know how we can get our tweets to pick up more attention, right? So that could be very interesting as well. It's not really clear yet whether this is a stunt to drive up prices or it's actually a legitimate takeover effort, but we are continuing to follow it, and certainly it's a big talker here in the U.S., particularly here in Washington, D.C., because, you know, the public square increasingly here in Washington is Twitter. It's not TV.
Right.
Sorry, guys.
Well, we've been following this news as well, Jessica, and your guess is as good as mine as to his real intentions when it comes to this takeover bid. But thank you so much for your coverage today, Jessica. We hope to talk to you again real soon.
You bet.
Take care.